this is weird. She sent me this room. I'm like, but that's not the room I clicked on. So sorry about that.
That's all right. I was starting to worry that maybe I had done something incorrectly. So
No, I was in the other room going, this is weird. But then my mind clicked in for a second. It's like, wait, something's afoot here. I can tell these things.
Well, I'm sure you've done this about 10 million times. I found at least a couple.
Yes, my friend.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad it's still your friend. I'm not sure I call it my friend anymore, but I am grateful for it, I guess.
Time zones and Zoom episodes are like, I don't hold any grudges against anyone for getting it wrong, because I'm like, let he who is without sin cast that stone, because I have done it way too many times.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, I am so honored that you said yes to this. I really am. I think you ought to be a household name.
Well, thank you.
I think I find you inspiring, and I'm just so grateful that you agreed.
Even my own dog doesn't think I'm inspiring in a household name, and that's my dog in my house. So thank you. I'm glad to hear it.
Well, I wish we had many, many, many more people like you in the church and in the world. So there you have it.
Yes. Woo, we should.
Woohoo! Go Lorenzo.
Thank you.
So you seemed like the right person. So I think I told you in my email that I've started this digital project, including a podcast, and interspersed with the usual things I do on the podcast, I'd like to start interviewing people and creating bonus episodes.
Cool.
And I thought you seemed like the right person for the very first bonus episode.
Whoa.
I know you like to do brand new things. You're an innovator at heart.
I am there with you. I am just, it's like anytime someone says like, hey, I have something new, I'm like, you had me at new, go on. It's like, it's like, we're going to jump out of an airplane. It's like, oh, I should have waited till I heard a little bit more.
Yeah.
So, but other than jumping out of an airplane, I'm pretty much up for trying all the new things in the church, because that's how we learn.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, and I think that's such an obvious and unfortunately not very often stated fact. That's how we learn, is by
what's funny is I have discovered that there are a lot of people who are trying, and whether that be because we as a church folk had finally realized, hey, if we don't change, there's not going to be much of a church left for us. But what I think is really true is that most of the time we were trying, but we didn't want to tell anyone, or we were afraid. There's always been this sort of fear of things aren't going to work out, and if they don't work out, I'm going to look bad, or the church might, and that's just not the case. But so I am just continuously amazed by how many people are out there trying just some beautiful, wonderful things. The Spirit really is in the church. It's amazing.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. And I know there's a lot of people out there in the world that are also glad to hear that. So I guess I should start by introducing you, because although I know who you are, the listeners and future YouTube viewers don't know. So you are Lorenzo Lebrija. Am I saying that correctly?
Ding, ding,
Head
ding.
Director of TriTank, a lab for church growth and innovation, is what your website says. So
yeah.
But also on
which I get that some people will hear that and be like, I hear you say church and growth and innovation. Those are all good words, but they generally don't go together. So I always get a look from people like, say more about this thing you're talking about.
Well, you jumped my question. I hope, because church and innovation hardly ever go together. So I'm wondering if you'll talk about that a little bit and tell us a little bit about TriTank.
Absolutely. I'd love to. Hey, now you're talking my language. No, what's interesting is we oftentimes think that church and innovation don't go together, but the church has been innovating for a long, long time. I mean, I remember, and I swear to you, I am not name dropping, so I won't even say the name, but I was talking to a high-ranking cleric and who reminded me that once upon a time, the Nicene Creed was seen as innovation. That was an innovative move. So we can go back to 325 to the Nicene Council, which is when we came up with the creed, where it was like, look, we have all these books and we have all these people that we need to and so even then I'm sure that there was change, like, but we like reading this other book. Why do we have to read now these other books? And so even then I'm sure that people fought back against sort of innovation. But, or when Martin Luther came up with songs that could be in our language that were actually able to be sung by a congregation, not just a choir of paid professionals. That also was an innovation. So, but you're right. We generally are not seen as the most innovative people in the world. And there's a lot of value in that because unlike, for example, the things that we can say of when we see Silicon Valley, and in Silicon Valley, people are like, oh, so you're like Silicon Valley, you're out there trying. It's like, yes and no. Silicon Valley's main sort of beginning of any project is break the past, break what you have, and then start again. So that's how you sort of move forward, is by breaking it. That's the easiest way. We, on the other hand, what we have is the opportunity to keep with us this beautiful tradition. We can't just throw out the tradition that we have with us. So it's an interesting way of innovating. It's like, yes, we want to move forward. We need to innovate. We see that the Spirit is calling us for something new. Our God is a God of always creating something new. Yet at the same time, we know that we can't just break the past and let it be. We have to bring it with us. So it's an interesting sort of place to be. It's an interesting sort of yes and sort of place to be, where it's like, yes, we can still find innovation, but we can't forget where we're coming from. So that's sort of what we are, an action research laboratory. When we were creating TriTank, it was like, so what would this be like, Lorenzo? The deans of Virginia Seminary and General Seminary, where we were having a conversation. I said, well, it kind of would be like a think tank, except we wouldn't just think about things. We would actually just go out and try them, because as our church moves along, we know that we are a church of primarily smaller congregations, and we can put out the world's best papers with the greatest ideas, but few people, when you have if you have at least one full-time priest in your congregation, will have the opportunity and the time to go out and actually do anything with that. So we had to figure out, like, all right, what we need to do is we actually need to go and show that it works, that it can work in multiple settings. That's the action research part. And then we can disseminate the information that we have. It's like, look, we have this idea and we think it's worked well. Can you do something with it? And that's what we've discovered. We have, as of today, and we're recording this, I just realized it is December 1st at 1:11. 1, all these ones on my time. Yeah, so it's what we realized is that we have birthed two new ministries, probably now coming up on 4 that we're about to announce, that with 2 more new ministries have birthed because of the work we've done. We have failed all over the place trying to do this, but we have done 59 experiments to date that we have either finished and like I said, probably we fail right now in a ratio about 2 to 1, meaning we go out, we try something and it's either too expensive, it's not feasible that, yes, we could get it done, but there's no way that a congregation could actually do this on a regular basis or it would work. But we've also had successes of places that we think we're like, oh, this is actually kind of cool, and we've done it. I'll give you some examples of that, because I think that's what mostly tells people what TriTank is. They're like, okay, innovation in the church. What does that look like? What does that feel like? So we created an Alexa prayer app, but it's actually called a skill. So an app, what would be an app on your phone, is called a skill on a smart speaker. And the reason why we did it, we created this prayer app where you can pray with Alexa. You can say, Alexa, open Episcopal prayer, and she will open up and say, the Lord be with you. And like a good Episcopalian, you will respond, and also with you. And then she'll lead you through morning prayer. She'll play for you the recording of morning prayer from Forward Movement. And the reason why we do it is not just because, oh, how cool is that? The reason why we do that is because we know that people who engage with Scripture at least four times a week, are more likely to go to church on Sunday. We also know that they seemingly are happier in their lives. They're less likely to be depressed. They are more generous with their time, talent, and treasure. And they're even better citizens. They vote more often. These are just what the research shows. So what we tried to do is, like, is there a way that we can lower some of the barriers so that people can pray more often, so that they can engage with Scripture? So right now, about 500 people on an ongoing basis are praying the daily office with a smart speaker. And who would have thought about that when the smart speaker was being created, or when it was first released? As like, yes, I'm creating this technology and it will be used for people to pray. It's like, nah, they probably are like, people will buy stuff from this, right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing we're working towards. We haven't yet released it, but we're working towards a small little digital sort of plate where we call it a digital collection plate. as we go to more and more becoming a cashless society, people will just be able to tap their credit card and choose an amount real quick. And in 3 seconds, they could make a gift to the church. So as the plate goes around, and if they're going to give you cash and they only have a $20 bill and a $1 bill, you are not getting the $20 bill. So this allows people to still be generous to their church and using that. So it's things like those, where things that we've done for a long time, but are there newer ways of doing those things? But it's not just technology, though. And by the way, you are talking my favorite subject, which is the church and tri-tank and innovation. So I will keep talking for like the next hour if you don't stop me at some point.
Well, I'm enjoying this. So are these the 4 ministries that you said have been successful? The Alexa?
No,
No.
That we have actually launched has been the Alexa, which is now owned by Forward Movement. We did this thing called Latino Ministry in a Box. So imagine yourself as a rector or a member of a congregation that you realize your neighborhood is changing and there's a lot more Latinos, but you don't speak Spanish. You're like, how am I going to reach my neighborhood? I need to be able to reach out to them with the good news of Jesus Christ. How do I do that when I don't speak the language? So we created a systematic approach, step by step, no different than when like a new church is being planted, that begins with relationships, and then it builds from that onto a little Bible study, and then it goes from a Bible study. And by providing some very simple tools, it actually, we were like, will it create community? We tried it in 8 different congregations around the country, and we were able to create community. We were giving them an agenda for like an hour meeting, and it ended up being like 2 hours. And Mrs. Gonzalez was bringing food. We're like, okay, this is working really, really well. This is beyond what we thought.
Food is a good sign, yeah.
Right? It's like, that's going well. That means people are breaking bread together, literally. So what that did is 3 dioceses, the dioceses of Delaware, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey, have decided to come together, take over that ministry, and they're going to give it as a gift to the wider church. So those are 2 that we have launched already. And there are 2 that are coming. One is we are going to be, okay, some news. I'm going to break some news with you here today.
All right. You heard it here first, everyone.
That's right. We haven't officially said it to anyone, but we're actually going to be, we were creating an experiment to figure out if we could plant communities using radio, particularly Spanish language communities, because Latinos still listen a lot to the radio and give a lot of trust to the radio. So rather than the old-fashioned way, which is you put a missioner in a community and one by one people reach out and you make connections and then you build a little core team, we're like, could we do that via the radio and reach a wider group of people and do it in sort of, so can we buy half an hour of time? And then as we were doing that, we realized like, there might be an opportunity to spread the word about the Episcopal Church to the Latino community by offering us a syndicated program. And so we'll be launching in January with at least 10 stations, because we're still getting more, a radio program, a weekly radio program. It's kind of like, it sounds a lot like Car Talk, if you ever listen to Car Talk on NPR. So it's very funny.
Yeah.
It's very funny and casual, but it's talking about theology and it's got music. And at the same time, but it is evangelism, but it doesn't hit anyone over the head saying, come join our church. It's just like, we're just talking theology. And the thinking is, well, people will listen to that and the Spirit will do the work. We don't have to do that work. The Spirit will move hearts. And we're hoping, and so we're going to try it for a year. But that's a new ministry that was launched from another experiment where we're like, this is working really well. The show is sounding really, really good. And people are really liking it. So why don't we offer it for free to stations around the country and syndicate it? So that's another one that's launching. And the 4th one is a thing we call home videos. So what we do is we have she's a missioner in Indiana, and she does a weekly 3-minute video of her sermon that she gives at her church. She does a 3-minute version that she's posting on YouTube, and her community has grown from like 3 people online to 1,700 people. But what this is now meant to be, and the reason why we call them, it's called Good News on the Go, is because it allows people, when we are done with COVID and people are able to take communion to other members of the congregation who are homebound, it allows you to have a tool of a sermon that's a 3-minute sermon so that you can take it with you, you can play that and then discuss it with the person that you're bringing it to. So the person doesn't have to think about, do I need to come up with a sermon for this person? It makes that encounter with the homebound person a more meaningful encounter because it's around the gospel. It's around a sermon and the explanation. It's opening our hearts and our minds to that. And that has worked well. And people are responding to it online. So that's also going to keep going. So those are the 4 sort of successful ones that have become like now ongoing ministries. And in the same way, we have, let's see, we have 19 that are on hold because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
We have 20, no, I forget the numbers right now. Yeah, we have something like 16 that are ongoing right now. Maybe it's 12 that are on hold because of COVID. But so we have a whole bunch always moving forward, because as you know, with any project that anyone ever does, there's always the inevitable slowdowns. You have to wait for your other person to do something. And we try to always do it with partners so that it's not always just us. And so by having multiple of these going on at the same time, even if one slows down, we can speed up on another one and get it going. So we have always good ideas, and we're always looking for good and new ideas. So we ask people to always reach out. Anyone can reach out to me, Lorenzo at tritank.org. I'm the only staff person, so you will hear directly back from me. And I just love talking to people about ideas. And sometimes, and I also do this, is people just need a conversation partner, someone to talk about and say, hey, would you help me out? I'm trying to think this idea of doing something new. Would you help out? And I say, yeah, of course. and I help them out with just thinking through ideas and how we can implement them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm curious, you did a audio meditation for Riverside Church in New York City. It's on their website. It was I think it was a Lenten audio thing.
Yeah, I've done a couple of things for them.
Yeah, and in the one that I listened to, you talked about spiritual origin stories.
Oh yeah, I think I tied it in together to like comic books, didn't I? Or superheroes.
You did. You talked about comic books, and you talked about the reading from Scripture. You know, Samuel anointing David.
Original, yeah.
So I'm just wondering. I mean, you know, to be honest, I don't meet that many priests that have your spirit of boldness and creativity, and it's so much needed in the church. And I think people are really hungry for a church that is willing to risk and listen and go out and be with people in the ways that you're coming up with. And I'm just curious, do you have one of those spiritual origin stories? I'm wondering if you've ever reflected on what makes you so creative, and then how that creativity maybe ended up in a church context in you. It's sort of an odd combination.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. You know, it's interesting when you go through the process of becoming a priest, you have to do all these psychologicals, as you know. And mine, I happened to ended up looking at my psychological profile, and I'm like, I can't make sense of this. So I shared it with my therapist. I said, does this say anything I should be aware of? Am I crazy at some point? Gonna go like crazy and just start talking to myself or to trees or something? And he looked through it and he's like, oh, you have divergent thinking. I'm like, huh, is that something I'm going to die from? Should I like be calling my mother and putting my affairs in order? He's like, no. What that means is that if I were on a boat that's sinking, I would not lose sight of you. I'm like, what does that mean? It's like, whereas most people have convergent thinking, which is they reach a decision and then they stop looking at other options and possibilities, which is why sometimes if the decision between when you make it and when you're carrying out is a long time, you could miss a whole bunch of red flags along the way, and people still carry out a thing that you're like, why did they end up doing that? Didn't they see that you sort of become sort of siloed onto one decision? Divergent thinkers can continue to offer, which makes me not the best companion at a restaurant. I will grant you that, because I'm like, well, I could get this, or I totally could get this. I could mix these two and be, so I come up. So he's like, you would come up with 22 ways of getting off a sinking ship, rather than just focusing on the one that someone might be like, I need to get on that boat to get off the ship. I'd be like, well, you know, that door would certainly float, or we could certainly do that and this. And that's just the way my mind works. But that's not, I think that's just the way of working. I think anyone can be creative. All of us have the creative spark within us that God has given us. Where the boldness, I think, comes from me is, you know, I really, really love God. I really, really love Jesus. And I think that not enough people know God and Jesus. And so we are called to share that good news. And so I'm not afraid of failing, quote unquote, as such, because this is what I want. It's like if I had a really good chocolate cake recipe, I'd want to share it with everyone, and I'd want to go out there and just share it. Now imagine that chocolate recipe like times 10 million. And that's what I think of God. And so I just want to share that with everyone. So it's that I think emboldens me. I was 39 when I went to seminary. I had a career. I was in arts management. My career kept sort of going. It was in an upward trajectory. I was running an organization. I had done really, really well, but still I felt this calling to the priesthood, to be an ordained life, because that's just how I saw the world. That I always saw God and Jesus and everything. So I think that's what the combination of the two, which is the wanting to share the good news of Jesus Christ with the world that so desperately wants to hear it, and a God that I really do think knows especially how many gray hairs I have, that just leads me to believe, I don't know that I could do that much damage if I'm trying to do good, right? So even if we fail along the way, that's okay, because God is with us in this. So we just keep going. I mean, look at the stories in scripture. The biblical witnesses that God's chosen people are really like the ones that have the worst seeming luck. It's like, oh, I'd rather not be one of your chosen people if I have to spend 40 years in the desert and stuff like that. Could I just be like one of your acquaintances rather than one of your chosen people? And I think that is for me. It's not going to be easy, because God never promised us easy. God promised us we wouldn't be alone. So we go out and we try. So I think the combination of those two, which is a God that's always going to have our back, and a belief that this is really, really, really good news. I really believe that religion and God and Jesus can transform our lives. And I think that makes a difference, because I really, really believe it. It has transformed my life. My life is a gazillion times better because Jesus is in it. And so I think just the mixture of those two, I really believe it. And then it's like, well, God's got my back. So what do I have to lose, type thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
But I don't want to make it sound like, I don't want anyone listening to be like, well, I'm not holy enough, or I don't have, no, because it is not about that. There are moments when I'm like, God, are you listening? Because I don't think you're hearing me. I feel like I'm out in the desert. And there are moments when I show up to my daily office prayers and I'm like, I'm just going to do it because it's a habit at this point, not because I want to be here today, but there I am and I'm doing it. Is you show up in a relationship because that's what you do. But it's not because I'm in any way holier or in any way smarter. There are smarter people, gazillions of smarter people than I am. I just happen, maybe it's the other way. I'm like a dog. I'm just like, I'm just happy-go-lucky, and I just keep going. I don't know good enough. I'm not smart enough to know when to back down.
I think there's something holy in that, to not know when to back down. Yeah, I think that's a lot of what faithfulness is about. But that's just my interpretation. But I do wonder, so I think if people are interested in hearing more about TriTank and the specifics of it, you have a lovely interview with Scott Gunn on the Forward Movement YouTube channel, and I'd commend that to people if they wanted to learn more. Of course, your tritank.org newsletter and website. One of the things that you talk about in that interview with Scott is you use the phrase holy failure. And I wonder if you'd just take a minute. Again, you've put together two words that typically don't go together. Holy correctness or something, or holy rightness.
That would be better, right?
That would sound more churchy for sure. So can you tell me a little bit about what you mean by holy failure?
Absolutely. I think that so I'll tell it in a story. When I was in seminary, I had the opportunity to go see a friend of mine be ordained. And at that beautiful ceremony, it was at St. Mary's in Times Square in New York City, Smoky Mary's as it's called, because it's big and they do a lot of incense and it's just this beautiful place. And she had as the homilist for that evening was a priest from England who was visiting, or she knew, and he at one point just turned to her and said, go out and do good, because you will never hurt the church doing it. Many people much smarter than you have tried to kill the church and have been unable to. You, in doing good, will never hurt the church of God. And I know we sometimes say that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I don't believe that. I believe that good intentions really do carry us far. And if we are trying to do good in the church, even as we fail, we will always learn, and God will see our faithfulness in that. And that is what makes it holy, is the fact that I am being faithful to my calling, and I am being faithful to what I feel God is calling me to do. Now, this is why we have the three-legged stool, right? In Anglicanism, is we have to make sure that it is rooted in the biblical witness and our tradition, and then also ourselves and our own sort of mind. If you think that, just doing something because you think and the tradition doesn't say it and the biblical witness doesn't say it, then we have an issue. You should really discern that a little bit more. But most of the time it isn't that. Most of the time it's we don't try something new because we're afraid of changing. And here's the thing. We have all evidence in the world that we should continue to evolve and change as a people of God. That is what God actually is calling of us. And so I'm going to tell you another story. I'm a story person. This is why I love doing homilies and why I love visiting churches when I'm invited to go be with them. So Kodak, you remember Kodak, right? The Polaroids
I
and
do,
the films
yeah.
and cameras. For all you youngins, there were these things called cameras that actually had rolls and it was film. It was amazing. And Kodak was the biggest producer of film and developer of film. And this is how you got pictures back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s until now everyone carries the camera that's better than anything ever and on their phone. But Kodak actually developed a digital camera. Kodak had it.
Yeah.
They decided not to release it because it would cannibalize their existing business. They said, we can't release this. This will eat up our business. And I once heard someone describe that as Kodak was not playing to win. Kodak was playing not to lose. And there's a difference between when you're playing to win and when you're playing not to lose. And I think that one of the things that our church has sort of succumbed to is this belief that the church is dying. And so many congregations are in this state of, we need to survive. We need to do everything we can do to survive. And that means you circle the wagons and you keep it as steady as you can and you do the best you can. Whereas where God is inviting us is like, no, play to win hearts, play to win more people for the kingdom of God. Go out there and be disciples, go out there and be different. And that's just a different approach. Now, I am in no way saying that we should get rid of Sunday morning or that we should get rid of church as we know it. I'm just saying that the invitation is there for us to be fearless as we go out and do this work. And that means that sometimes we will fail. And that's okay. That is holy failure because we're doing it for God. And things we do for God are holy.
Yeah. That's a beautiful answer and a good reminder to all of us. And I think, I think in some ways it's a new dilemma for the church. The church has sort of been on the winning dominant side of history for a long time. And now we're sort of turning that curve and the world is becoming more secular and the church is feeling that it has lost its strength in some ways in the culture. And that's a scary thing for people. And they don't want to lose what they've had. So I think you're right. I think there are a lot of churches that are living out of more fearfulness than boldness. So thanks for saying that.
Well, a couple of weeks ago, remember the gospel story of the talents, right? The one with 5, the one with 2, and the one with 1. Many of our congregations have gone to the point of let's just bury the talent and we'll just return it because we don't want to be the ones who. Nobody wants to preside over a church that has to close, but I don't think because we try things, churches are going to close. It's when we stop trying things that churches are going to close.
Right. Yeah. And, to be truthful, I mean, there will be churches that will close and then there's room for new things. I mean, death is part of the cycle of rebirth, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's hard, but true. Yeah. So not all the listeners are priests, for sure. Probably most of them are not.
Woohoo!
So I don't want to get too geeky on church with you. And we are nearing the end, I think, because we've already covered more than a half hour, although I'm having such a fun time.
Oh, wow. Time does fly.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, my digital project is called the Questions Project, and what really drives me is questions that I have. I'm not necessarily the kind of person that likes to sit in an answer. I'm much more interested in pursuing questions. I gather that you are also that kind of person, especially after what you explained about divergent thinking. And you seem to be kind of a what if person.
My favorite
So
question.
I'm just wondering, are there what if questions that are still lurking out there, or are there questions that, are sort of at the core of what seems to be your life mission that nag at you and pull you forward?
Oh, every day. There are what if questions are what drives the work. What if we did this way? What if we did that way? And it can happen from reading an article to having a conversation, which is why I love being in conversations with people, being a conversation partner with someone that's thinking of ideas. In my own personal life, I think that the question that drives me is, what if the world just realized how loved we were by God? And that is because, again, my life has been so impacted just by recognizing that I am God's beloved, that God, September 12th, 1972, God looked out into the universe that God had created and said, you know what's missing? A crazy guy named Lorenzo. I need someone like Lorenzo Lebrija to be in this universe. And thus I was born. And that means that I am so special, not any more special than anyone else. That's the economy of God, that you can be super special and so can I. And that's perfectly, they don't have to be a zero-sum game. They can coexist together. And so the more people realize that. Now, I also recognize that there is suffering in this world. Do not get me wrong. But I also think that in suffering, realizing that you're God's beloved will give you some comfort. That in the moments of despair, recognizing that as well. And we see that all over the time. Anytime you read the story of a saint or a martyr or something, you see that even at their last moments, they recognize that belovedness of being with God was enough for them, even in spite of things going wrong in life. And so it's not just about when things go right or go wrong. So it's just about living into that love of God. Bishop Curry believes this. Bishop Curry lives into this, which is why we are the Jesus movement. And because Jesus was about love and inclusion and loving, and just so the more of us that we can do that with. And so that's what I think drives me. And so in my personal relationships with people, I'm always looking for, what if this person, what if my brother, what if my mother was able to recognize in this moment how beloved they are? How can I be a presence of God with them? As a priest, I am often called because of the collar, just people ask me these deep questions that are painful questions, that are some of the questions that have no answer, right? The theodicy question, not to get too geeky, right? How does a good and loving God allow bad to happen in the world? And I don't have an answer to that. My answer to that is it's a mystery. It's a holy mystery. God will not have to do anything. God will, I hope, explain to me someday how and why that was, right? What I wasn't, but I also recognize that I don't know, but the tip of my fingertip compared to what the reality of everything else that there is to know. So I don't know how electricity works, yet I go turn on the light and the light turns on and I'm happy for it. And so I just have to accept that I don't know everything, and that I don't know even how simple things that we do understand, I don't understand them. So how can I be prepared to try to understand something that maybe we're not meant to understand? We have saints from Augustine on down that have told us that we're not meant to comprehend how God thinks. And so that's okay. And I think that's one of the things also, is just to be able to, as you were talking, to be able to live with the question, to just sit in that mystery and not be afraid of it. Because I think for me, recognizing that God has my back means that even if I don't understand it, the underlying foundation of it is God's love, if that makes sense. I hope I haven't gone too around there.
No, it was beautiful. That was beautiful. Thank
So I'm
you.
not a philosophy major. I'm not a theologian either. I'm an action researcher in the world that just because I do see people hurting.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I wish I could help people just understand more how much God loves them and that would make a difference.
Yeah. Well, I think you're not just a director of Tri-Tank, you're a preacher too at heart.
Well, I think all of us who are in this work, if we don't have the love of Jesus in our hearts, as the song says, right? Then we're not worth what we're doing. We shouldn't be
Right.
in this work. It
Yeah.
really is a vocation. It really is being called to, and so as the world gets more secular, and by the way, this also means that we as a church have to be okay now that we've gone digital, right? So I wrote a chapter in a book that just came out about what will we keep from COVID that talks about, and one of those things is digital church. It's here to stay. We as a church have to be okay though, especially those of us who are in a sacramental sort of theology like ours, that how do we work with people that may never set foot in our church? How do we still present and be present to them and sacramental to them if they don't set foot in our buildings? How do we still? I love wrestling with those questions, and there's a lot of people that just say no, that's not a question for us. Whereas I'm like, no, yes, let's engage the question. It could still be, by the way, and I'm perfectly open that we decide we don't know how to do that right now, and so somebody else in the future may come up with a better thing once we have, augmented reality or virtual reality. That might be something, but right now we don't have a way of doing that. But that's okay because we've at least engaged the question, and that's, I think, all of these are just invitations to engage the question, not just begin with an automatic no. The same way that when you have a new idea and you bring it to the vestry and Mrs. Johnson says, no, we tried that in 1987 and it didn't work. And you're like, oh, well, but it's not 1987 anymore. Maybe now it will work. And that the same way we as a church cannot turn around and say that we don't like when people tell us that we're not going to try something new and then say, well, but we ourselves are not going to engage in new questions. I think there's always invitation because God's always calling us to new things. God's always calling us to be more.
Yeah.
God will always be greater than us.
Yeah. So I wish I had time to pursue that. That sounds like a whole nother podcast or offline conversation because I'm thoroughly excited about that whole idea and intrigued by it. And I hope it's something that the church proactively engages with as we move forward.
We're going to launch in January because of the fact that our work is pushing sort of the boundaries and the envelope a little bit.
Yeah.
We have reached upon, and I can tell you, we have several experiments going on right now that are really trying to get at the true power of Facebook to reach people for God, which is, I think, a wonderful thing. Except Cambridge University just put out an article in October calling Facebook a moral issue. Because of the addiction of it. Social media now it's addictive. And somebody brought up the question, a theologian that I respect, brought up the question, is like, hey, when do we not use a tool that's addictive, even if we're using it for good? A beautiful question that we need to engage. And
Right.
so what we're doing is we're launching in January this thing called Theology in Conversation. And so what will happen is I will sort of represent let's push the envelope, and we're going to have theologians on the other side, just in a conversation like this, where we're going to talk about when do we draw the line? Where do we draw the line? Because at some point, we do need to draw the line. You're right. I wouldn't use a gun and put it to someone's head to bring them to a church to say, look, I'm bringing you to Jesus, even though I used a gun. I'd be like, no, that doesn't make sense, right? There's a line that I've crossed there. So as technology keeps expanding, as we keep expanding, we need to keep having that conversation, be like, yeah, we want to use these tools, and we have a lot of churches on Facebook right now, but are we using tools that are actually not helping our people? Are we using tools that are hurting our people by making them even more addicted to this multi-billion-dollar corporation that just sees them as a product and selling them? And at which point do we not do that? Do we not lead more of our people into that? And I think that's just a beautiful. So the same way that we're doing it with Facebook, there's several other experiments that have sort of touched upon. One of them is alcohol. Should we not use anything that has anything to do with alcohol to try if it involves alcohol, should we not use it to try to bring more people to God? Again, these are questions that I love engaging. So what we're going to do is we're going to record it as a conversation. Then we're going to release the audio, the video, much like you, and we're also going to transcribe it and release the transcript of it, edit it for clarity and better. And then we're going to engage it as a conversation with more people beyond just that. We're going to put it out there for the world to see and get responses from it so that more people can engage in that conversation, because we really do need to have more conversations. At some point, cyborgs are a real thing now. There are people that have fake arms. We have people that are competing in the Olympics that have, a certain percentage of their body is now a machine. So at some point, someone's going to be like, hey, I want to marry that thing. We call it a thing because it's at which point do you stop calling it a human being and more of a robot than a thing? And we should probably start having those conversations about theology and AI, and it just to be present to where is God in all of that, because God is in all of it. So let's start engaging it. So I'm excited by that too.
That sounds really exciting. And if I understand correctly, you are also writing a book. Is that?
Yes.
Do you have a publication date? Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah. So the book is currently with the editors. I have turned in the manuscript and everything, and it
Congratulations.
is being published. Thank you. It is being published. The title of it right now, it could change, I suppose. It is called How to Try Using Digital Thinking for Church Growth and Innovation. Digital thinking is a framework from the business world that TriTech uses to create new ideas. And I guide people in the book step by step. It's only 3 steps, so don't get too excited that people are going to get lost. It's just 3 simple steps as to how to sort of try it in a way that makes sense. How do you do the research? How do you find out your neighborhood? All these things. Then how do you come up with more ideas? And then how do you go out and actually execute in those ideas? And it'll be published next fall. It comes out from Church Publishing.
Terrific.
So I'm super excited.
I look forward to that. And I'm also looking forward to the results of your listening project. And there was another one, Making All Things New, where you're interviewing different churches about innovative things that they're doing and listening to people.
Yep, we are. Yeah. Making All Things New is a project that we're doing with the National Episcopal Church office, the Church Center in New York, where because a lot of churches during this pandemic pivoted a little bit and tried new ways, and some of those things are going to stay, and we want to sort of lift those up and show the world, look at these cool things that came out of this. Yes, it's a horrible thing. Don't get me wrong. I am not wishing that the pandemic had happened, none of that, but from it, there can still be some good things that come out of it that we can learn from and be like, hey, maybe we want to do some of that. And it doesn't look that hard. How do we do it? And the other one, the listening project, is the thinking is that there are church growers in our denomination. There are people whose congregate, even though we keep talking about the numbers falling and the numbers that came out this fall sort of reiterate that, but there are churches that are growing. And so our thinking was like, what if we talk to a whole bunch of them and figure out, hey, what are the habits? What are the things that you're doing? And we have discovered a few things along the way, which are pretty cool. They're great at conversations. You can drop in like, oh, you should shorten the peace time during the service, because that actually, believe it or not, a longer peace time makes people who are new to your congregation feel really awkward. And then inadvertently, they feel bad about being in a place that just made them feel awkward. So when they leave, they don't have as good a sense of that place, simply because for those 3 minutes when everybody was sort of saying hi to each other, they felt awkward. So they might not even be able to name it, but they have felt it, and that makes a difference. So how do you counter that and stuff like that? But we're hoping that we'll have those anecdotes that maybe at 50 conversations, we'll probably be able to put together like the 7 habits of highly effective church growers. But at about 100 conversations, we're hoping that we'll discover some surprises from the Holy Spirit. I don't even know what they are, but what if we discover, like, for example, that they're having like 80% of them are having oatmeal for breakfast? We'll be like, should we be feeding oatmeal to all seminarians here on? It's like, that's a thing, people. Start having more oatmeal. More fiber is good for the church. I don't know, but we're hoping to find some surprises. So, and that's what's cool about this work. Is like, we don't go in expecting to always succeed. We're okay, again, with the holy failure. And I'll finish with this if you want. When I finally took this job, when they offered it to me, I was like, oh, this is awesome, best job ever. But I had this fear. It's like, oh my God, what if they think that we're going to discover in this work like a silver bullet to save the church, like if the church needed saving or something? That would just be awful. And a lot of weight on my little shoulders to carry. So I don't think I want that. And I asked them, I said, hey, how will we know in 3 or 5 years whether or not we've succeeded? And I'll never forget, it was Kurt Dunkel, the dean and president of General Seminary, who turned to me and said, because we will have failed more often than we succeeded. That's how we'll know.
What a beautiful answer.
And I said, I will take this job.
Well, that worked out well. The Spirit was in that one. Well, Lorenzo, I think you've already mentioned maybe you want to recap where people would find you online. And And
Absolutely, sure.
yeah.
If you go to TryTank, that's TRYTANK.org. You can see all of our experiments are listed on there. You can sign up for our wisdom group, which is if I need to make a decision on the fly, we have a texting thing, and I just put out a poll to people and be like, hey, should I go with yellow or green? And they write back, and we see answers, real world answers from people, and we use it a couple of times a month. And we do send one newsletter out a month that has a letter from me sort of about something that's really exciting in this work this month. And then it has updates on all the active experiments. And that's also where we put out calls for people to join our experiments. When we do an experiment with a congregation, we pay for it all. We go in and we pay. You basically are giving us the laboratory in which to try it. So we go out there and try it with you. And we have a whole bunch that are coming up that we will be looking for once we pass this COVID pandemic, where we will be back in congregations and trying things in there. So we'll be looking for more partners. So trytank.org. If anyone wants to talk to me, it's Lorenzo@trytank.org. And I'll be happy to set up a time and just sit down and chat. If you just want someone if you have an idea that you either want to help with in running it on your own, and we can help you with that too. Or if you want an idea that you just want to pass along that you maybe have had that someone should try, and you're like, hey, here's an idea that I always thought that some church should try. I don't want to try it, but here it is. I'm leaving it to you. We might just go ahead and do an experiment around that as well. So either way, I'll be happy to talk with people.
Well, it's clear from this conversation, I knew it already, but now everyone else knows that you are a tremendous resource and inspiration, and just a real sign of hope and creativity in this world. So thank you for that. It's really a blessing.
No, my pleasure. Thank you. And thanks for having me. And being the first bonus. Woohoo! I hope that it was worth it.
Absolutely. I am so honored, Lorenzo. It has been a joy to talk to you. And
Well,
thank you so much. I
My
really
pleasure.
appreciate it. Okay. Well, through email, I'll get back with you and answer any questions you might have about when the episode will air.
Excellent.
And that kind of thing. And
Yeah,
I
and let
look
me know so
forward
that we can also put it on our newsletter, and others can watch it as well.
Oh, how exciting.
Everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right.
Cool.
Well,
All right.
blessings.
Well, thank you so much. Blessings to you as well. God bless and have a wonderful day.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.